Willie Martinez talked today about how they want to play 3 or 4 guys at corner. They want to play 3 or 4 guys at safety. I think at safety that's probably a little more feasible than it is at corner. But if it is, if they do it at corner, I think Christian Charles is kind of the big X factor. He's if he can kind of continue to come on and become the player I think he's really capable of. I think all of a sudden you look in Tennessee certainly has 3 guys that can play, and you're kind of searching for a 4th at corner. And then one last thing I'll say, and I might have touched on this last week, but Juwan Mitchell just seems like a different guy than he was last year with his commitment level, with his conditioning, with all that stuff. He seems really, really locked in, and I think that does a lot to just change the perplexion of Tennessee's linebacker room, and really having 3 guys you feel really good about, and then obviously I think Solon Page III is the guy they feel good that they can play. What level he plays at, I think, kind of remains a question mark. But those are a few things, and one last thing on Juwan Mitchell. Handful of scouts there today, NFL scouts, and a lot of guys, watching Juwan Mitchell from that group.
Interesting. But what does he provide, like, now that it's been, because I think a lot of folks have just forgotten, he was kind of a big deal transfer from Texas. Like, that was kind of a big win early in the Heupel era, and caught a lot of people by surprise where they're like, oh, we lose Henry To'oTo'o, we'll just insert Juwan Mitchell and it'll be fine. And then, of course, he has the really rough injury last year that takes him out and not a part of this team. But, like, what does he actually provide, and why would he be an upgrade over what we have seen from Aaron Beasley to this point?
And I'm not even sure I would say he'd be a huge upgrade over Aaron Beasley. I think he's a little bit better in pass coverage, a little bit more physical, but not that Beasley struggles, I think, between the
That's a water bottle.
between the tackles. But I do think Mitchell is more physical and built more to play in interior running game. But more than anything, while I think he would, might be better to Beasley, I don't think he's game-changingly better than Beasley. And man, you just have this guy that, like a Henry To'oTo'o would be, that just completely changes the complexion of the room. But that room just didn't have bodies last year. I mean, he had 3 guys that played, and with, all due respect to Solon Page, he wasn't particularly good. And you just need more guys than that, especially, which we've talked about many times on here. With Tennessee's offense, the amount of time Tennessee's defense has to spend on the field, you got to have more than really you would like to have 4 linebackers you can play. And I think Page is in that category that you can play, but at least 3 guys that can play at a decently high level. And I think that's what Mitchell's emergence kind of gives Tennessee with Beasley, Banks, and then Mitchell.
Interesting. It seems like everybody's raving about Banks too. Like, the linebacker room might be pretty okay this year.
Yeah, and to me, it's the pass coverage is the question mark there. I mean, those guys were pretty okay last year, against the run, at least all individually. Collectively, with the lack of depth, I guess it was a little bit of a problem. But you're right, and Banks' interception on Hendon Hooker during scrimmage on Tuesday was a nice play. And, obviously, that's in pass coverage, and I think Mitchell's had a few interceptions earlier in camp too. So I think, to me, that's kind of the X factor, is how good can these guys, or how effective can these guys be in pass coverage? And so far in camp, I think there's, reason to be optimistic about that.
I also just think when folks are really worried about the secondary and stuff, and I think Flowers and McCullough will be fine on the back end, and I think it will work itself out at the star spot. And, maybe it's turn time. Maybe he's awesome. Maybe it's Wesley Walker. We'll see. It might be okay. Like, I'm not really as worried about that, and I think they're going to have more bodies at corner. And like you said, Willie Martinez wants to go 3 or 4 deep, and they might have that this year. I would assume it'd be Burrell, Turnage, Charles, and Haddon as the 4, if he can get to 4, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the 4 where Turnage ends up at would kind of be the question mark there too.
Yeah.
He's kind of been a swing guy for him. But that's the 4 bodies, I think they have that are capable. D. Williams would probably be kind of on the other edge of that if Turnage did have to.
Marion McDonald's been getting a lot. I've seen him being written about a lot, and that's just kind of odd that he's someone who might be someone to watch, right?
Yeah, I think at the star spot, to me, from what Martinez said today, it kind of sounds like Wesley Walker and McDonald are the 2 main guys at the star. And Martinez, he said there's a lot of guys repping in a lot of different places, and he didn't want to get into too much depth chart type talk, but he kind of did get suckered into a little bit of it at the star. And yeah, McDonald is a guy that's been there. When we saw him on the very first day of fall do a little bit of 11 on 11, he was the first guy at the star. And really, I think you look at Martinez was really complimentary of how good he was on special teams last year. And I think that's always something defensively. if you're a young player, the first thing you need to do to show that you can belong to play on defense, and that's be a good special teams player, and he was that. And then I think too, you look, fast or rewind to the spring and look at how many guys since he had out in the secondary. McDonald was not one of them, and I think he basically almost exclusively was one of the only guys that was playing star during spring practice. So we got full four. He was at safety before that, and I think he could still bounce around and play there some. But 14 full practices working at star almost all alone, I think will bode really well for where he's at here in fall camp.
I'm curious to see what happens with the defensive line because I think that will help a lot of the secondary concerns. It's like if there's a pass rush, because like Tennessee they just were not a havoc team whatsoever. There was no havoc rate. They blitzed a lot, but they didn't get home. They just never got home. They never really moved the needle on that side of things. But I think they're going to be an aggressive pass rush. I think they're going to continue to be aggressive defense. It's just more of getting home and actually being able to play more than just Matthew Butler, Tyler Barron a little bit, because I mean he didn't start for the majority of this past year, and a lot is riding on his development this year. But you have so many bodies where you hear like Bryson Eason might start, but it's like a lot of talent. So a lot of folks are nervous. It's like Elijah Simmons has all the talent in the world. Bryson Eason has all the talent in the world. Amari Thomas should be a good player. You go up and down the list, like Byron Young, we just have this guy and like he's just there and he's going to produce, and we're pretty confident he's going to be an NFL draft pick next year. And then you look at it, there's just too many bodies on the defensive line at this point that like I don't see how this pass rush is not better next year. Like I don't think it's gonna be elite. I think we're still